Hello folks and welcome to our game. Myself, Shane Stevenson, joined as always by Michael Verney here. We're going to review all of the big GA talking points from the weekend. Reminder that we're brought to you by ourstore.ie, which is the home of official merchandise for our game. Also, if you want to do one of our coaching clinics, email us at events@ourgame.ie. And also, if you have a big interest in getting us to do a club fundraiser for you, we can certainly do that as well. So same again, email events@ourgame.ie. Michael, how's she cutting?
Good, Shane. And the fella on to me there yesterday actually said, "You never get sick of talking shite." Basically, because of the shows that we're doing and the regularity of them, I suppose, to make the club season. And I suppose the odd time you do, but generally no, to be honest with you.
No, we say talk. We've got how many more years of talking rot on this show do we have? God knows how long. Decades?
I reckon. I actually, it's funny. I used to teach, and I used to end up with woeful bad tonsillitis out of it. And I'd say if I stayed teaching, my voice would probably be gone by the time I'm 45. I'd say. And if I ever go to the sideline or start coaching or that, I'd say I'm going to have to change my approach, because every time, even after the Burr match, I was hoarse for a couple of days after it. But I keep my voice in tune as much as possible to keep doing this as long as possible.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, some amount of drama over the weekend, as there always is, and I'm not talking about the Rugby World Cup. To be fair, Ireland-South Africa was a brilliant game.
Savage,
fair.
Yeah. And you know something? It's rare that these things live up to their billing. I actually think it nearly surpassed its billing, and considering it was only 13-8, just the drama of it all and how close to the line they were at times. And like, Ireland didn't play particularly well, made probably a hell of a lot of mistakes, probably rolled out a bit of a storm in the first half. But it was brilliant. It was brilliant to watch from start to finish.
Yeah, and you know, it was also brilliant. They're after the Australia-Wales game, so Australia were absolutely useless. And Eddie Jones was being interviewed, and there's all this talk about him at the moment doing interviews with Japan. And he was being asked questions directly beside his captain. Do you know, are you going to be over the team? Have you been doing interviews? Have you another interview? And he said it's a bit red hot around here. And he was talking about he's basically just going to get up and walk out. But imagine you're after managing a team. You've had a useless performance like that, and you're getting this line of question, whether it's right or wrong. Oh, very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, it doesn't rain, but it pours. I'm sure that rumour hasn't come up out of nowhere. Do you know what I mean? I think it was before the World Cup they're talking about he sat down. And then, like, there was another kind of a leading question, like, are you going to sit down with them again? And, like, I think the question was put to the captain, like what's the mood amongst the players? Like, if your manager is talking to another team, and this kind of cracked, like it was, as you say, it was fairly red hot. The performance on the pitch was absolutely abysmal. And I know you put out a tweet last night, and it was in relation to the Spurs. And you just said, amazingly how quickly lovely patterns of play can be established with teams that have looked straitjacketed for a few years beforehand. And it's the same with hurling teams or football teams. You know, a certain manager is over them. Maybe they're bamboozled a bit by tactics, or training's not going particularly well. Performances usually reflect that. Somebody comes in, or they're playing with a bit more freedom, and all of a sudden, like, the style of play is so much easier to watch. Lads are expressing themselves a bit more. They don't, like, the worst thing you can have with any team, and it happens with GA teams a lot, is when players are looking out to the line, I think, for what do we do here? What do we do here? A lot of it, and I know you could say it's cliched, but a lot of it is on instinct, and you play your best stuff when you're actually not thinking about what you're doing a lot of the time, or, you know, you see things on the pitch and it's like, you know, they have a sweeper or whatever. You make a couple of calls amongst your teammates or whatever. You're playing around the sweeper straight away, and it's like that. It's done rapidly or whatever. But it's kind of funny when a new manager takes over, or players are given a new lease of life. They just start to play with a freedom and express themselves like never before, probably a lot of the time.
So Richard Hogan says Ange is really refreshing at Spurs. Now, you don't follow too much soccer. Do you know what his surname is?
Yeah, no, Postecoglou. Yeah, no, I do. Oh, okay. I've been following that because they're going particularly well at the start. Videos have started recirculating about, was he over the Australian soccer team at one stage?
He was over a team in Australia, as far as I know.
So videos have started to kind of recirculating, and it just kind of seems like he's very likable fella, and players are playing for him. And that's, you say that's a cliche too, but a lot of time players, you'll get more out of players if they care about the manager, and there's not a distance between the manager. Now, you can say the flip side of that sometimes as well, but he definitely seems like a very interesting fella.
Yeah, he was an Aussie manager. He was Aussie manager. Yes, Fernie says Conor Heaney. While we're speaking of down under, congrats to Conor McKenna. He scored a great goal as Brisbane Lions booked their place in the grand final with a 79-63 victory over Carlton the other day. So might as well mention that.
Just on that, Shane, as well, like considering that's his first year back from, taking, how many years did he take out? 2 years out to play Gaelic football, and like he was unsure of whether he wanted to play AFL again, and he was homesick and everything. Like he is knocking it out of the park this time around. Like he's a much better AFL player than he was in his first stint. And I don't know if that's because he has the monkey off his back and he went home and he won his All-Ireland and now he can go back and play with that bit of freedom or whatever. But he seems to be, as they say down there, he seems to be a much better ball player now. But you see the goal he got, the little interception, flicked the ball off the ground back up into his hands and scored a deadly goal. Yeah, I think they're massive underdogs going into the final next weekend. I think it's Collingwood, is it they're playing?
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be unbelievable if the year after Zach Toohey and Mark O'Connor won, that we had a couple of more Irish winners again? It'd be savage.
Yeah, Dara Joyce is involved also. And, we'll be talking a lot about Kilkenny Championship as we go along. We'll be debating whether Liam Blanchfield scored 3 goals or 4 goals, and he's not long back from Australia as well. But it was very hard to tell from the footage. It looked like the ball that was kind of loaded in by Kevin Blanchfield connected with somebody's hurley. Liam Blanchfield didn't exactly, like, he did a bit of a fist pump, but was one of those ones where a team scores a goal and it was probably an own goal because the celebration from the closest attacker, it just wasn't that convincing. Let's see as well also, there was 5 games this weekend that we're aware of at senior club over the weekend that were decided by penalties. Now, we did a Twitter poll on it, and I'll bring it up here, and we'll just have a little discussion, and maybe our viewers as well can get their thoughts in. Are penalties the right way to determine the outcome of a match? So in this case, we're obviously talking about senior club championship matches, and maybe junior as well, and intermediate, it's just as important. But 586 votes so far, there's 8 hours left. And yes, 45.9%, no, 54%. Just kind of tells you that people are fairly unsure.
Yeah, it's quite a divisive one, really. Some people are like, and I know you're of this opinion, finish it on the day, adds to the drama, makes it a more memorable spectacle. And I get that. But I think there are stages in the calendar when there are openings. Like, say, for example, in Laois yesterday, it finished, I think it was 2-1, was it Camross? Upset Clock Balacala, finished their 4 in a row bid. Like there was loads of time, and the conditions were cat as well. There was loads of time to play that game next weekend when there's football going on with neither of those teams involved in that. And I know that I actually was chatting a fella involved with the winning club there in Camross, and he was nearly half gutted for the Clock Balacala lads because it very easily could have been them on the receiving end of it. I think it's difficult for a club player, whatever about a county player, that's, you've gotten to that standard. You put yourself out there. You're open to a fair whack of criticism. But I just ask you this question. Like, imagine you were playing for, we'll just say playing for Borrisoleigh because that's your local parish and where you were brought up. And just say you missed a penalty in a county semi-final and that was the penalty that meant that Borrisoleigh lost the game. It's a tough one. Like, that is a tough one to be going back to your local pub or whatever. I don't even know if I'd go, I'd be that sick. And the best will in the world, most lads wouldn't say anything to you and they'd understand and they'd be like, fair play to you for stepping up or whatever. But you have a couple of idiots in every parish that will say it to you. And when there's drink on board, it could invariably lead to something else. And that's the nature of it. I'm not 100% sure if it's fair necessarily on club players. I don't even know if they practice them. We heard Conor McKenna saying earlier on this year and the Monaghan boys saying at county level that they didn't even practice penalties. I think it's a hell of a lot of pressure and responsibility on a player. Now, I'm not saying that they're all should be shrinking violets and saying, we can't put any pressure on players like that. I'm not saying that either, but the consequences of missing are massive.
But what about a player who misses 5 frees and his team lose by a point, or somebody who misses a penalty in the last minute of a game?
He's the expert free taker, though. He's the free taker.
Yeah,
that's his responsibility.
Mentally, it could take the same toll. I mean, nobody likes to be the reason that their team lost.
Oh no, 100%. But he's been practicing them for whatever length of time. That's his responsibility.
But we're talking about mental free, like how it would affect you mentally. So irrespective of whether you practice or not, it still could impact you just the same.
Yeah, no, 100% it could. But I think when you're the main free taker or whatever, you've been dealing with that for years or whatever. Whereas if you're the 5th penalty taker and you miss, you've never probably had to deal with it before. you know, I think this is the divisiveness of it. It's
Yeah, but
great.
like we've made mistakes where your team ends up losing because you slipped or you kind of miscontrol the ball and the other team scores a goal towards you. You know, we've all been on teams like that. I mean, this is the reality too. Things can
Yeah,
go wrong.
but I think that's in general play. It's not this, you know, closed skill where everybody is just looking at this and this is I'm not a fan of it. I wouldn't like to win it that way, even though I've won soccer matches on penalty shootouts. I don't like to win that way. I wouldn't particularly like to lose that. I tell you what, if I had put all I had into a club season, either as a manager, a coach, or a player, and you get beaten 2-1 on a penalty shootout, like Clock did, and their 4-in-a-row bid is gone. I don't know.
Tough.
The result shows you're beaten, but you weren't really beaten. You know what I mean? If they played them again, it's funny because that was 22 scores to 18. And I think they had, was it 3-9 to 18 points after normal time. They were probably the better team on the balance of play, and it ends up going out to penalties. Listen, it's the way it is. I don't think you'll hear too many people crying about it, or the people involved. Does that make it still the most efficient or best way to finish off a game?
Yes.
Well, I still don't think it does.
Will you read out that comment from P-Well74?
I'm plenty tough enough, P-Well. I ain't no snowflake either, I can tell you that. But yeah, I just, like, when the calendar allows it, and particularly for semi-finals, finals, go another week and see who's the best team over the 60 minutes or the 80 minutes.
Yeah, toughen up, Bernie, a snowflake, says P-Well74. Paul Scully adds in, no fear of Bernie ever stepping up to hit a penalty.
Why, Jesus, I stepped up in the soccer back in the day. I'd step up again, no bother at all. Absolutely no issue.
Did you connect with the ball with the correct foot?
Oh, my God, I did. Even though I ended up going down a rabbit hole last week of, you know, mad penalties that were taken. And it's just amazing how creative people have gotten in soccer. Like, you know, you're going with the big run up to kick it on your right foot and you kick it with your left and the keeper is lost half a second. Like, you know what I mean? Some of them are absolutely brilliant.
Josh Brady scored a lovely penalty for Éire Óg against Rathvilly in the Carlow semi-final over the weekend. He did the little stutter step, which, you know, in soccer is par for the course, but it's almost putting yourself up on the parapet or sticking your head above the parapet in GA. You're asking for abuse if it goes wrong.
Keeper didn't really go, to be fair. The keeper still went the right side for the penalty. It was just a good penalty, to be fair. Actually, you're leaving yourself up into some amount of criticism, aren't you? Jesus, like that's fair cojones there, because imagine the slagging after if it was saved.
Adrian McGrath says penalties are fine. The game has to be decided. The crack of 5 lads going around in circle and maybe missing 2 or 3 penalties is wrong, though. So obviously, for anyone who doesn't know the rules, that in GAA, it's the 5 lads. You know, 5 lads on each team take penalties, and instead of going to the 6th or 7th guy on a team, they continue around with the same guys starting over again. Actually, and not necessarily in the same order as we saw in the, was it Monaghan Armagh this year?
Yeah, Monaghan Armagh, yeah.
Yeah, and the same guy did miss twice, and Gary Mohan obviously missed his first one, scored his second one. River Power says, Verney's still scarred by the minor. Clare came back stronger for losing that penalty shootout. Toughen up down in Offaly.
How would I be scared by what minor? It was Clare that were beaten by Tipperary. I had no skin in that game.
Well, yeah. Oh, look, more comments coming in here. Porrick Gill says, penalties wrong in my opinion, Shane. It's a team sport and so the results should be determined on the field of play, not individual set pieces.
Agreed. Yes,
well,
I'd agree with that.
Just keeps blowing the whistle and turns it into a glorified free-taking competition.
But that's a what if. Like, it's, you know, generally I prefer for the game to be decided in general play. Yeah, I just think it leaves it open for. Listen, it leaves it open for a lot of things, but the best team will generally always win in general play. Penalties, not so much.
36 and counting says, good draw for O'Loughlin's and James Stephens and Kilkenny. We'll see what Dicksborough are made of next weekend. I'll just give you out the draw while we're talking about that. Glenmore, this is quarterfinals, Glenmore against Bennettsbridge, Dicksborough, Ballyhale, Mullinavat against O'Loughlin Gales, and James Stephens against Greg Ballycallan, Erin's own Castlecomer against Danesford in relegation. Richard Hogan says, sad to hear of Padjo Whelan's wife passing over the weekend. Sympathies to all in Burge GA, and we'd certainly echo that. Joe Butler, the big guns are paired against each other in Kilkenny for the quarterfinals next weekend. Current form team versus county and All-Ireland club champions in Dicksborough and Ballyhale Shamrocks. Michael?
Yeah, no, just like that, echo Richard's sentiments there. It was down for Susan Whelan's funeral yesterday. Very sad, obviously. A fine camogie player back in her day, and obviously mother to like three of the, one of the most famous hurling families there is. So deepest sympathies to everybody involved there. I thought one of the comments that came up there was actually very interesting from River Power as well. He said, I like the five lads things. It's extra cruel. Like, it's like maybe like the Mrs. Doyle thing. Maybe I like the misery, of making tea or whatever.